Hey, happy to spend some time with you, Danny Pommells and Noah Levick here in the Sixers Talk podcast brought to you by Wilmington University. Wilmu Works. Our producer, Ben Barry, in the cut, making things happen. Amy Fadul with the day off out helping in the community. I think she had a golf event that she organized that is turned into an annual thing. And she is always doing her part to help make the Delaware Valley better. But we are here to try to help people feel better about the dread that they might have, the consternation of what happened with Paul George. Noah, you were at the Sixers practice facility, fresh with the vapors of the car leaving the parking lot. What did you hear there, and what is the latest update?
Yeah, the latest update as of 3:33 p.m. subject to change is Paul George was there in the facility. He got checked out again, evaluated in some fashion, and Nick Nurse said everything checked out okay so far. Paul George is due to receive imaging later this afternoon, and as expected, he's not going to play in the Sixers-Nets preseason game tomorrow. That would have been the case regardless. But after the hyperextension of the left knee in Atlanta, which is obviously an injury that causes a lot of uncertainty. Thus far, we've heard nothing especially negative, but I think it's still a little bit wait and see. And obviously the Sixers want to do imaging just to have the full picture of exactly what happened with Paul George after an awkward play where the knee very obviously did hyperextend. But as of now, no bad news to report for the Sixers and Paul George. He told the Inquirer's Gina Mizell after the game that he was not too concerned himself. And for the time being, the Sixers have yet to learn anything terrible or alarming. Of course, you would strongly prefer not to have an injury storyline with your new star addition. But I think we can safely say at 3:35 p.m. That we have not yet heard anything bad about Paul George's health status, other than what we saw in Atlanta, which was just he hyperextended his left knee, and of course was going to leave the game as soon as that happened. So I want to be consistent with the way you frame things, but also give us a little leeway here, just in noting that things are subject to change as the Sixers try to fully understand exactly what the state of that very important left knee of Paul George is.
I mean, as it stands right now, it certainly could be worse for sure. And I think people should take a bit of optimism from the fact that he's not considering it severe. It doesn't feel like it's severe as of yet. And hopefully, like he said after the game to Gina, that some treatment and, the imaging will reveal exactly what's going on and things will progress in a weird, quirky, weird way that it happened in the second quarter. I think it was Josh Johnson. He was trying to guard. And maybe this is why the all-star players don't play defense, Noah. This is why they don't play as hard on defense. Paul George, a guy who has, definitely guarded a good wing or two in his career and shown that he can stay in front of some guys and be very disruptive on the defensive end. But it's tough to be in a situation where all of a sudden you're like 7 days from the Sixers starting the season, and it's just all just comes down like this. And hopefully, all that they've been able to grow and develop and, gel as a unit in this time that they spent in the Bahamas and in training camp and stuff like that doesn't go all for naught, because you're hoping that this time when they were able to get in the facility before the year began and things like that to help them develop and get some camaraderie and grow together and, figure out who likes the ball where and some type of development and what groups like to play together and things like that. All that doesn't go out the window. And that was one of Paul George's concerns after that. That has to be kind of chief, aside from the health of Paul George, the biggest concern for the team. What do you think, Noah?
Yeah, but you'll take starting a little behind where you ideally want it to be if we're talking about a relatively minor injury, I think that's fine. I mean, yeah, Nick Nurse said Paul George has been exemplary with all that behind the scenes stuff, has really been a consummate veteran leader, really committed to the day-to-day work of trying to best integrate to this new team. But absolutely, it's suboptimal for him to have any sort of injury when you're talking about the acclimation process. And as we'll get into, even last night, the units that he's playing with and how he can, have the best impact. Like if he's playing in a bench heavy lineup and being responsible for taking, a more important offensive role in those units, you would certainly prefer he had more than 4 minutes of last night's second quarter before the games actually count in those situations. But given, the worst case scenario here is something catastrophic, year ending. I think a scenario where Paul George is sidelined for a short period of time and doesn't feel quite as comfortable as he'd like when he checks into his first regular season game as a Sixer, not a bad outcome whatsoever, considering the spectrum of possibilities here. But yeah, Nick Nurse today was really candid about they're still very early in the experimentation process. Starting lineups fluid, rotations fluid, and you'd love to have everyone healthy and available, but that's not the reality that the Sixers are living in. And of course, one aspect of that is Joel Embiid will play 0 preseason games. So that's another challenge that this team just has to deal with and have to do the best they can once the games actually do start to truly matter.
Yeah, the big article from Tim Bontemps on ESPN dropped yesterday morning, and those are some expensive left knees, man. Between Joel Embiid and Paul George, $100 million at least this season of left knees, and Joel not playing back-to-backs doesn't surprise me. And if they're using that Tim Duncan model as the way they want to proceed, listen, who am I to argue with what will prolong his career and deliver him to the postseason healthy with all the nicks and bruises and aches and pains and broken bones that he's had to endure. I just feel like if they just outwardly say it, that's just the bold part to me. Like the league is trying to crack down with the incentives of the in-season tournament and load management and stuff like that. But it's to come out and say, I'm probably not going to play back-to-backs, and the Sixers saying Paul George might not either. Did you think that was kind of a bold statement to make? I just thought that to come outwardly and say it was pretty bold.
Yeah, I think there's some semantics to it, right? Like it's Joel Embiid who's saying he guesses he's not going to play back-to-backs the rest of his career. It's not the team saying on record, Joel Embiid will play 0 back-to-backs purely, out of extreme caution. And then there's also the element that he has a very long, well-documented injury history, as Kawhi Leonard did with those championship-winning Raptors, that championship-winning Raptors team that Nick Nurse coached. So it's not merely that Joel Embiid is walking on eggshells because his presence on the floor is so important. It's that they're playing it safe with him throughout the season because he's managing, injuries that have caused him to miss games and been very legitimate and significant for him in the past. But yeah, we'll see how all this plays out. Of course, that's part of the vision of why you add a third star, that on those back-to-backs, you've always got at least 2 stars in that lineup, and it's not a big drop-off as far as just like your talent level in those games. But the Sixers do have 15 back-to-backs this year, and we'll see how they manage it. I think some of it'll be really just kind of going on the fly, but it is very clearly articulated by them that caution and the playoff health of their stars is paramount, and they're not really going to budge on that. And I think it's fair. I think it's fair enough. So that's the expectation, and we'll see exactly what it looks like in terms of how they follow through with it.
Buy your tickets accordingly. I don't know if it'll be the first game of the back-to-back, the second game of the back-to-back. I'm sure national TV games will come into play on who plays when and why, but you can be 100% certain this scare with Paul George's situation is going to make them ultra cautious, even more cautious than they may have been on who plays when and how long and things of that nature. So thank God there is an Energizer Bunny and Tyrese Maxey in the mix that you can kind of plug and play as needed and mix and match. But what are you thinking?
Yeah, I think 100% agree with it, but boy, I think his health shouldn't be pushed entirely into the attic either, right? Yes, he's the youngest of the bunch, has exceptional energy, but the reality is, players who are averaging the most minutes in the league, as he just about did last year, are at a higher risk for injury. So
Right.
Tyrese Maxey, now the norm is that he plays the entire first quarter. I think that makes sense, but I think Nick Nurse also has to be smart about, okay, is there a little window to buy Tyrese a few minutes here because the bench units roll in, and maybe this game, instead of him playing 39 minutes, that looks like 34, and that gives him a better chance to maintain health through the season. Of course, Nurse in Toronto, Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam, these guys were always right at the top of the league in minutes per game. And now we've got a situation in Philly where two of the Sixers' three stars are surely not going to be near the top of the league in minutes. Fine if Tyrese Maxey is, but I think that's going to be a storyline to monitor throughout the year. Yes, Embiid and George, the caution there, extremely important, extremely warranted, but I think Tyrese Maxey is an intriguing and an important aspect of that whole picture as well, in my opinion.
So if they say Tyrese Maxey isn't playing in back-to-backs this year, you get a call from the league. But if it's Joel or Paul George, it's you can massage it a little bit there.
I would imagine so. Yeah, I think as you said, the initial impression with Tyrese Maxey is he can run for days, right? So I think there might be a little skepticism, in that hypothetical, but I think often you got to tie it to an existing documented injury. So, if Tyrese Maxey tweaks his ankle, and then a week later he doesn't play one leg of a back-to-back, I imagine the league would give that one the green check. But yeah, I think with Tyrese Maxey, it's fine by me, if his minutes are 38 or 39 per game, but I do think there's got to be the same larger picture in mind of, can he play 41, 42 good minutes a game in the playoffs? And you'd hope the Sixers have that same sort of big picture perspective with Maxey as well.
Yeah, I want to get into replacements for Paul George should it come to that, and he's not able to start the season on time in a bit, but I'll be remiss if I didn't mention, I can hear Amy Fadul saying now, can't have nice things. I can hear her voice saying that we just cannot have nice things. But a nice thing it was, man. Let's really give credit where it's due, and what we did see from Paul George Friday against Minnesota, and leading up to that second quarter where the Sixers were down in that game against the Hawks and were able to come back. But man, he was just looking so silky smooth, and no disrespect, but the difference between what he brings to the game, and even him and Caleb Martin, and what Tobias Harris brought, just a big difference. Obviously, Paul George just silky smooth with the ball in his hand, the way he can float with it, bring it up the court, grab it off the glass and go. Just a great dimension because it allows other players to fill lanes, and he's that quasi point guard and bringing the ball up the floor. Obviously, 3 dimensions, can get to the rim, the mid-range shot as well as the 3-point shot, spot up shooter as well. But just the dimension that he brings to the Sixers, and obviously you see the scoring load that he alleviates from Joel Embiid when he's not on the floor, because I can't imagine how it might look when we see them on the floor together, particularly with George demanding so much of a presence, which alleviates some of the pressure on Embiid offensively, and he's not able to be double and triple teamed. Maxey obviously in the mix as well. So him on the floor just provides that pace I think Nick Nurse is looking for. I really don't see how it doesn't pick up the tempo of the offense, which is something that he's been stressing here leading up to the season.
Yeah, I mean, I think the number one thing that jumped out to me from Paul George's preseason debut is like he's the smoothest player in the league, arguably. Like you immediately see when you're watching him why so many guys try to do what he does. Like
that's a great point.
So many young guys say, like, yeah, I model my game after Paul George, and this is why. Because yes, there's that fluidity, but also a great knack for knowing how to squeeze off shots and when to be explosive and how to get the defense off balance. You know, all of those traits are pretty fun to have on your team, I think. And yeah, I think his passing, like, it's not virtuoso stuff, but I think, yeah, in both the half court and transition, he tends to make the right sensible play. So he's going to throw the basic hit ahead pass. He's going to make solid reads out of the pick and roll. And he's just going to be comfortable just in almost any spot with the ball in his hands. And I think that's definitely a huge plus for the Sixers and just enhances the field that they're a versatile team who can have solutions to whatever's thrown at them. So yeah, not a huge sample size yet with Paul George, just one game and a little bit. But I think he was what he's been for a long time. And yeah, that's obviously a very important variable as well, just what the pairing looks like with him and Joel Embiid. But hard to imagine that both those guys would not be extremely effective together. And we're waiting to see it, and TBD on exactly when that'll happen.
Let's take a break here in the Sixers Talk podcast. We will talk a little bit more about Paul George. Of course, the Sixers trying to make sure that all is well with this team. I'm laughing because Ben Barry has some Tobias Harris comments here in the chat that we didn't get to. Now you realize that Tobias Harris's cheeks. Let's show love to our title sponsor, Wilmington University. Get to know Wilmington University online or in person at its open house on Wednesday, October 16th. Details at wilmu.edu/open house. Celebrity cook Steve Martirano brings his Italian-American cooking back home to Philly. Enjoy Martirano's Prime at Rivers Casino and Steve's Famous Meatballs with Sunday gravy, prime steaks, and more. Make reservations for Martirano's Prime on Open Table. Back here on the Sixers Talk podcast, and it's funny about Rivers Casino. I was on Twitter and I saw an alert pop up on my screen. Eagle Eye Podcast live from Rivers Casino. Look at Noah, you're shaking your head.
I was I was like, oh, breaking down that big win over the Browns.
Right.
So yeah, the Eagle Eye guys are always cooking.
Yeah, definitely. All right, we have this automated Halloween pumpkin by my front door that it has these scary messages that it says based upon noise. Like, so if you scream, then it says something. So that's why I clapped, and it, like, I don't know if you heard it going off in the background, but it's a little weird.
No,
but
okay. What was the message in response?
Oh, it'll say, do you want a treat? It's to die for. Okay. Or it'll say, don't be scared. I don't bite, stuff like that. So
that's kind of reassuring, if anything. Yeah.
It says it in a creepy voice. But,
okay. The voice, the voice does.
Yeah, it's pretty funny. But all the same, is interesting. Rivers Casino, one of our old haunts. We'll be back there eventually, but it was good to see the Eagle Eye guys in the mix, having fun. Of course, Philly season is over in a sad, disappointing way as the Mets continue to win. They beat the Dodgers again last night. But as we are thinking towards what's next for the 76ers, we did glaze over a little bit of the Celtics game with I guess the B team is what you guys said. The young guys out there, Justin Edwards and so on and so forth, having a good time out there. Anything we need to glean from that game or mention that's worth talking about, Noah?
Yeah, I think B team's a little generous. I think maybe the freshman team. Look, I think the most notable thing is Jared McCain again flashed the talent, flashed the offensive ability. 20 points, wasn't super efficient, but I was impressed with the relentlessness and just looked like he wasn't scared at all out there. Like, went at Derek White a couple of times, with mixed results. But you see the ability to, I think, score inside the arc too. We all know that he's very promising as a catch and shoot guy, has that quick release, the pure jumper, but there's work to do. That said, I think he has some feel for how to use his strength to score around the rim. Has some creative finishes, wrong hand, wrong foot sort of stuff around the basket. And I think is comfortable, scoring off of jump stops, off of 2 feet in that like little in between range, that 8 to 14 feet area that theoretically is really nice to add, I think, for a young guard trying to find his way in the league and getting comfortable scoring against NBA talent, NBA size, NBA athleticism. So there's growing pains that are very much expected for someone who's 20 years old and not the biggest. But I thought there were some intriguing little flashes there for Jared McCain. But hey, yeah, the bottom line is the Sixers threw not their best squad out there, gave the vets a night off on the second night of a back-to-back, and the final margin was, I think, a 50-point defeat. So they'll hope to not have anything along those lines in the actual regular season.
Ooh, yeah, it was a bad one, but we suffered through. We move on, and one thing I noticed from the Hawks game, unrelated to the Celtics situation, Nick Nurse is trying things, and I know Paul George was injured, but I saw Tyrese Maxey playing below the circle in that little zone for a bit with him, Andre Drummond on that back line. Did you notice that, or at any point?
Yeah, I mean, I know with the zone, to me, it feels like something they'll probably lean on a little more this year, in large part because Caleb Martin did it at a high level in Miami. And I know Martin's talked about he likes the early signs of his chemistry with Kelly Oubre Jr. at the top of the zone.
At the top of the zone.
Yeah.
Right.
So I think in lineups that do have Oubre and Martin, I wouldn't be too surprised.
That's a lot of length out there, man. A lot of athleticism, quickness. Yeah.
Absolutely. Right. So if you have those guys at the top, I do think it'll often make sense to have Tyrese Maxey kind of in the back line / wing of like a 2-3 look. The Sixers, are sometimes a little more matchup zone oriented. Like there's sometimes that's kind of how they structure it. And there's a little variety that Nick Nurse likes to throw in there. But yeah, I think Tyrese Maxey, even though he's 6'2", sometimes will not be at, the very perimeter of the zone defense. And they're adjusting and trying to get that all dialed in. But I think we've seen some zone in each of the preseason games, and I imagine it'll continue to feature in the regular season is my bet.
Interesting. Very. I like that idea of having those quote unquote dogs at the top of the zone who can be more like Scottie Pippen-ish, you know what I'm saying? Like getting in the passing lanes and using their length and athleticism to deflect passes and disrupt kind of the flow up there with the point guard and whatever they might be happening on the perimeter. Great transition into what the replacements might look like for Paul George if he's has to sit out some time. Obviously, they don't have to look far to the 76ers because we know that Caleb Martin was the contingency plan if they weren't able to get Paul George. So he's already kind of in the fold as someone who can maybe mimic some of the things that they were able to do with George. Maybe definitely not at the same clip, but it does give them some flexibility as far as filling that role and then trying to fill in maybe Martin's role behind him. But should people expect to see Eric Gordon, Reggie Jackson, or a rotation of those guys that kind of complement some of the areas that they need to fill in because George is out? Or how do you see them making up for George's absence if he has to sit?
Right. In a world where he has to miss regular season games, I would imagine it just means that both KJ Martin and Ricky Council make that initial cut of the rotation. And, in Atlanta, Nick Nurse just played 9 in the first half, and Ricky Council, the fourth, was the odd man out there. KJ Martin, I thought, played pretty well. But obviously, in a scenario where Paul George is sidelined, I think Ricky Council, the fourth, his ability to guard multiple positions, be an athletic, open floor kind of wing, all of that would be positive when you're looking to replace some of what Paul George brought to the table. of course, with any of these stars, the notion of a true replacement is ridiculous. They're unique and special players, and their talents are impossible to replicate. But yeah, I think I would imagine that Ricky Council IV would make the cut there. Reggie Jackson is not looking like a rotation guard right now. He's looking like a peripheral guy to me. And I think the Sixers feel good about their other veteran guards ahead of him in Eric Gordon and Kyle Lowry. But yeah, I think if Paul George is out, you do need a wing forward sort of guy in that mix. And I think that means that both KJ Martin and Ricky Council would be playing rotational minutes for the Sixers. But yeah, as we said, TBD as far as the timeline for Paul George's return. And once we get that, we'll have a little more clarity. I think regardless, Nick Nurse has framed this as like everything's fluid. He's experimenting. And that would certainly be the case even more if he has to deal with the absence of a star. But for now, we're just waiting to learn more and waiting for more details about Mr. George's status.
Are we going to see Ben Simmons? That is the question.
Guess we might, yeah. Sixers Nets at the Wells Fargo Center. Ben Simmons did play in Brooklyn's last preseason game. For every team, the preseason, it's kind of a crapshoot as far as who plays. Paul George is not the only Sixers, going to be sitting on the sidelines tomorrow night, right? But yeah, we might see Ben Simmons. I can't give you a firm yes or no as of now, but that does appear to be a possibility. He's back out there healthy enough to play, and as we know, if he does play, even in a preseason atmosphere, those boos will be easy to hear, no doubt.
Some clips floating around the web and the highlight spaces of him and Kyle Kuzma going at it. Kuzma dropped Simmons and then shot an air ball afterwards. Some interesting, funny comments from people about bum versus bum and those type of things that might bring you a chuckle or two if you're looking for something to lighten your heart here with this Paul George situation going on. But hopefully we do see Ben Simmons. And in those highlights, I'm making fun of it, but there was definitely some positive, Ben active, getting to the rim, getting a bucket or two in those highlights. He definitely wasn't shy or didn't shoot any jump shots, or that I saw, but he wasn't shy. He's showing his athleticism and looking more like a real basketball player. But hopefully we see some of that here as the Sixers and Nets. Hey, the show don't stop, right, Noah? The show does not stop. And we will be here every step of the way, regardless of what happens. Hopefully some good news about Paul George. These 34-year-old bodies don't react the same way they used to. But, man, he has looked silky smooth in the time he's been out there. Let's hope we get to see more of that. Check out Noah Levick's work on NBC Sports Philadelphia.com. Amy Fadul will be with us. We'll have another podcast on Thursday. We're ramping up to the start of the season, folks. We got to get these pods in your ear and in your viewing space. For Ben Barry and Noah, I'm Danny Pommells. We will see you next time on the Sixers Talk podcast, brought to you by Wilmington University. WilMU Works.